You know, we're all having our different struggles. We all have different upbringings. We're all struggling now in whatever it is that we're doing. But if we can kind of have that understanding and maintain that understanding and be open, then be willing to help you.
So I know you guys heard a lot of things about African and the African culture, African American culture, and how can we actually create a connection so that we can learn from each other's experiences, the culture. And I hope that's really going to be something that many of you are going to take as an assignment and really start this. I mean, we're in 2020. I mean, we're not going to wait 2040, 2050. So I think we have to take into our own hands and have control over the narrative that, you know, we want people to know about where we come from. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I really think that was really insightful. So going back to your career, I want to ask first about your career, because I know you do many things. How did you decide you wanted to have a science? You did science, right? A science degree. So how did you decide that?
So for me, I was just really good at chemistry.
Okay.
And I got a scholarship actually to attend Texas Southern University. Cool. Go Tigers. And so that was what I followed.
Okay.
And after I finished, I was able to do an internship where I worked for the TDC. And so I was just doing them like, okay, what do I want to do next with my life? And so at that time, that was where the recession was happening. So it was like I kind of graduated in an interesting time period where people weren't really hiring. It just was like, everything was like locked up. So after school, I did the internship and I moved back. And I said, okay, I think I want to pursue another degree. And it was actually my father who has a PhD in that degree in environmental toxicology that I was like, okay, maybe I should try my hand at it. I've been doing environmental things anyway in regards to research. So, you know, let me see where that takes me. And, you know, I obtained that degree, thank God. It was an interesting struggle, but a well rewarding one.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've been working in private industry and also public. So right now I'm in the public sector. And I've been working in government, and it's so interesting to see the shift between academia, private, and in public, because you get a different perspective from each, right? Overall, my biggest thing is making sure that we, citizens, people, residents who live here, can live in a environmentally friendly society and a world, but that takes like personal action on your part, right? And it also takes being involved in your own community, in your own space, right? Whether it's an apartment, whether it's a home, whether it's at work, you know, those different things, like changing your own lifestyle to fit that. And then also spreading that same kind of mantra amongst your own network and saying, hey, we do this, we don't do that, etc. Because the more people that you can touch with that same attitude, the more you can influence to, you know, be more aware of those things. And also to bring about awareness too about being environmentally friendly, right? You don't want to set up a full multi-family home next to a tank full of like, you know, different kind of petrochemicals that are like, those are things that people don't think about when you have all these great business ideas and plans, and then you want to set up shop right next to a school, you know, then you start thinking about the public health factors. You start thinking about all those different things. And that's one of the reasons why, like, the environment, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, all these different acts came about because somebody or a community said, hey, this is not right. We're being affected by all these different things, these chemicals, these whatever it is that are sitting up next to our place. They're just dumping it wherever. This is why government steps in to regulate that, to say, hey, you cannot do this. You can do this. It's acceptable. This is what the standard looks like, etc. So
that's really awesome.
That's been my career.
And that's really something that I think the everyday person don't usually pay attention to.
Right.
And the fact that you're actually in that field, and I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking of things that I may be doing starting today, or things that maybe I've done.
Right.
Like as we were talking, I'm thinking, oh wow, I need to really pay attention more to that.
Right, and I mean, it's not you. Some people start off with just recycling, and that's fine, and they can go.
That's what I do.
Right, and they can go straight into just making sure that like part of it too is also education, right? So if you understand how things flow that allow you to live your normal day life, then when things like disrupt your everyday life, you have an understanding of why it's disrupted.
And it's so funny that she's saying that, because I work for an environmental company. I think we work for the same company, but I used to work in Austin and she was working here in Houston. But I never saw that aspect, because what I was doing was just internal auditing.
Right.
So I never had to deal with that directly.
Right.
I think I heard, I mean, when I was auditing, you have to learn the process and how things work. But in terms of specific how the environment, like, I really didn't learn that. So I really appreciate that. But one thing that I'm taking from this brief description of what you do and things that we can implement is that you're actually a humanitarian.
Okay.
You are somebody who is so passionate about the human being.
Right.
And because it's so funny, because I looking at the link between your career and your businesses.
Right.
And I can see it's the same thing. For me, it's the same thing.
Right.
So with that type of heart, that type of passion, for me, I can already tell, oh, now I understand why she's so concerned or she's involved in creating a community of African American or African that can actually work together and learn, how to actually make it successfully in America.
Right.
So can you tell us more about that?
Okay, so part of my passion for that is one, dealing with identity, right? And I think that's the root of it is your identity. And for me, I kind of wanted to know what it was in America, because in America they classify you in these very, very simplistic ways for them just to know who is either attaining the job or going to school or in whatever school districts, whatever the case is. It's a very simple way. You're either Asian, you're Hispanic, you are Indian, you're Native American, or you're African American. And it was something I was like, I mean, I'm African American, but I'm really like Nigerian American, but I don't see that, so I guess I'm gonna check African American. And then I began to ask my parents a lot more about my own Nigerian culture, not just the words and speaking the language, but also about like our own like history. And a lot of like African history is really oral, right? It's more through like folklore songs or just an oral history. A lot of stuff is not written down. So, you have to be able to access parts of those history from your parents, especially if they're still living, to get that history from them. Because if it's not passed down, it goes with them.
Okay, another thing, this is side note. If you are an African or African American, why is it that we don't invest in actually writing our own books, our own stories?
I think we're starting to do that now. I will not say that we haven't done it, because
I know in the African culture, like you say, it's oral.
But we've done that though. Like some people, and you look back in the day, like there are audio versions of like, the songs or the stories or whatever the case is. So I won't say that we haven't done it. It's just that we need to continue to do it, especially in the African aspect. In the African American, they're very great at telling that story, telling their story, whether it's oral, whether it's writing, and they're still doing it. And there's still a lot of stuff that we still don't know. A lot of inventors, a lot of people who have done a lot of great things. And if you look now, 2020, we're still like finding out about, them. Same thing with Africans, we're still finding out like who was that. And I think that's one of my passion is really promoting the ones that we have now.
Yeah.
So that when we go down in the history books, people can say that, oh, she did this. Oh, she had that. Oh, she was impactful in this. Oh, he was an influencer in that. Like, it's literally not only like written down but it's announced. It's different to be written down, but it's also like a great shift when you're announced to the world that you're doing all these great things.
Yeah.
You know, and so everything can be always written down. A lot of people have stuff that's written down, but when you don't shed light to it, or there's nothing that's putting your attention to it, then it's always kind of like buried, right, in that history book until somebody looks up and say, oh, I know they had this. So that's where, for me, I like to be like that voice that announces those great things that we're doing in the diaspora. You know, whatever it may be. You're opening a school. You have, you know, your concrete batch plant. You are on city council. Whatever you're doing, you know, those things have to be announced, because we're currently, and I like to say this, we are currently writing our story right now.
We are.
Like, especially for those who
We
are, you know, African Americans that are first to go to school, first to do these things, or not first to do those things. Maybe you are come from generational wealth, and you're now, you know, teaching others what generational wealth looks like because your family came from that. Like, it's both perspectives. I don't want people to think that because you're the first to go to school and you have your own story versus somebody who is not the first person to go to school. Everybody has their stories. But the greatest thing is that we're all achieving great things in this time frame. And how can we now announce that to the world that we're doing great things and we're doing mind-blowing things, right? So like you keep saying, like, we need to write it.
Yeah.
We need to take control of that narrative. And I feel like that's what we're doing now. And I see that, you know, I see a lot of my friends, Africans, African Americans, Latino, white, whatever. And it's like we're literally taking control of that.
I mean, I can see the shift happening.
Right.
I can see it happening. I mean, I think it's even recent. Because I remember, like I was telling you, when I moved here, I mean, no, not really. Like, even in Africa, right? Even in Cameroon specifically, because that's the country that I usually go to, I can see more and more people now taking the stand and saying, I know about what happened in the 90s and I want to write that story. And I think it's happening now. And I think one thing is that social media also opened the doors for us to even know what's going on in different parts of the world. So people are like, oh, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that. Like, we always have our, you know, grandparents that would tell us, this is what happened in the 70s, in the 80s. But, you know, they really didn't, like, leave written words, right? It was just shared from one person to the next. So I think writing those stories, I'm actually excited, and I mean, I'm not discriminating against age, but I'm just saying all elder generation to actually start writing it down, because our kids, the next generation, have to have something that they can look at and see, this is where we came from. And I'm specifically thinking of Africa, because I think here in America it's already happening, the shift already happened, but back home
it's not happening.
It's
as
not
fast.
Because people don't even read books. I mean, we're still at that, you know. And I'm not saying people don't read books, like they don't read books at all, but they're not passionate to read books outside of school books. Right? Like just grabbing a book and wanting to learn about your culture or wanting to learn about something else. I think the culture that many Africans were told from their grandparents and they were told from the media. So I'm still dealing with that. Recently I was having a meeting last week where I was telling my sister we need to actually get somebody to write our dad's story. Because that's a story that every time we hear it, we're just like, wow, how did he make it? Right. But like, it's not in any books, right? So who is gonna know except us? So that's something that I think many of us should actually take the stand. For me, I'm like, if you have one story, you never know, because that one story can actually change somebody else's life. Maybe you have one person that can relate to your life and say, you know what, this girl did it, I can do it too. So I think it's really a good thing for me anyway, like, because I read a lot. So I love reading history books. I love reading success story, failures, and things that, you know, women that look like me, you know, that have paved the way for us to be sitting here Like, how was it? And sometimes you read those books and you get so inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was reading Tori Morrison's book, and I mean, some of her books, but I was so amazed by her because one of the things that she said was, if you want to read a book that you don't see, then write it.
That's true.
That's basically what she said. And I remember when she said that, I went on the mall, I'm going to write my books, which I'm actually working on. But
there you go.
Yeah, but those are the people, right? I'm actually having chills because those are the people that inspire me. And that is one woman that I remember when I read, I mean, it's after she passed away, that I was like, wow. Like, she just didn't leave books, but she inspired so many others to actually go about just write the book that you don't see in the marketplace.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, like a person like that would be like Chimamanda.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
I love Chimamanda.
She's a person that literally embodies literally what you just said of what like Toni Morrison did.
Yeah.
Right? And she's doing that.
Yeah.
And she has several books, several narratives that explains her own experience. And it also explains it for a person. You have a book that is okay for African Americans. You want to know more about Africans or Nigerians. You have books that are catered just to Nigerians. You have, I mean, it's a lot of different authors, I feel like, especially that are African, are in that space. I feel like they've been doing that.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're back home or they're here, it's now being exposed. Right? Getting the exposure for people to see and to read their experiences, shared experiences. But I feel like you said, it's just taking control of your own narrative, but also like being willing to write it down, as painful as it may be. Because I really admire Chimamanda because Half of a Yellow Sun was a very interesting book, not only to read, but also an interesting movie to watch, because it really brought back a lot of pain, trauma that occurred in Nigeria during that civil war. And a lot of like parents in my generation, my parents that are in their generation, it's still hard for them to talk about such a massacre, right? A lot of people don't know of that civil war. And so that book and that movie helped bring more light to it. People knew about it. There have been other adaptations of different, ways that war came about, but because it's a modern way, you can relate to it. It's still an interesting and difficult conversation for a lot of Africans that went through that civil war to still talk about it, because it's traumatic. Either they were in the war or their loved ones died in it, or when they asked their parents, it's just very traumatic. And so to see that on screenplay, it now opens up the conversation and the dialogue to have about something like that.
I remember another book that I read that really spoke to me, because even though we heard and we learned and we were educated about apartheid, when I Born in Crime by Trevor Noah, that book, at some point, I mean, there were parts in that book that I was crying. I was crying because the only thing that I was thinking of is his mom. I mean, she was, and sometimes you think the struggle, like you say, we're not comparing and trying to say who struggled more, but like going back to we have to write books was really Trevor Noah, when he wrote his book and the mom was going, I mean, she had to, deny that this was not my son just because he was mixed. Right. Because she knew that if she had said this is my son, they were going to take him away. And then you see the power and the love and the grit of a black woman. So I look at you and I feel like you are one strong black woman. Oh, wow. Seriously, because that's what I'm saying. Because
we're all strong black women.
Yeah, but you don't hear many stories that because people think of African women as a woman who's having a bunch of kids with, carrying them on her back. And they don't really see that. Right. And So from your experience, I just wanted to know what are some of the challenges that you encountered, whether it was, going through your, university years to get that degree, or whether it was through your career. What are some of the things that really shaped you to become the woman that you are today?
I mean, there's a few, right? And I think
Yeah.
that those trials and those struggles are definitely needed because it helps kind of build that character in you, right? To be that boss lady or that, that person that's just driven and a leader. For me, I think just one, I'm in an environmental space, and a lot of at that time, environmental people were, older white men. And that's really mostly in science. And that's where that's been this big push of like women in STEM, women in STEM, women in STEM. And thankfully, I was one of those people that came underneath that big push where they were really pushing for young ladies to enter into these hard sciences, chemistry, all those different things, because they didn't see a lot of especially minority women in STEM fields. And so when I finished college and I got into one of those companies, I found I was the only, first of all, female on the floor, and at that, Black. And so it was interesting because you're having to have dialogue with your counterparts, okay, that are African American men, and then also with your Caucasian men and women that are in the front office, and so it's interesting because you are like the only person that is a true like double minority, right, in that workspace. However, I will say that that is where I feel like those are opportunities for you to thrive and to show like that boss chick that you are, right? Because one, they see that you're educated and they may be threatened by it, but you can't help how they feel about you.
Yeah.
All you can do is just continue to do who you are, be who you are, right? Two, they see the kind of work ethic and drive that you have. Again, all these things may be threats, but at some point, you, as a boss chick, recognize those things and you make those things work for your favor. You make them work for you, regardless of whatever they think that's happening with you. When they begin to see, you moving in these spaces and making, the effort to get to know your coworkers or to make sure that the company goes in the right direction or whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you're navigating those waters, people will continue, like they will come and like navigate and gravitate towards you. So for me, that was kind of like one of those things where having those kind of struggles is kind of like being that minority.
But did you have the confidence, that type of confidence from the beginning?
No, I will say this. I was a little kind of like I kind of felt like I don't know if I belonged here. Like I have the degree, I have the knowledge, I have the wealth, but when I look, I don't see anybody like me. So it's like, this is a good job. I like it. I like this company, but I'm literally the only one here that is a woman and Black at that. So for me, I had to overcome that. All those things are needed because they help build character. They help push you to be that stronger person.
I just hope that many young girls or women like us or anybody who's watching can really take that and really implement those things that you were saying, like how to learn from each other, for example, and how to actually be aware about the environment where we live. So what are some advice that you can give to people in relation to environmental, awareness, and then how to actually be a boss lady, and how to be also part of a community where you open enough to learn from other people?
So I think the number one thing is being open, right? Don't be so closed off or closed-minded. Don't write those things off or write people off. Be open enough to learn and understand, whether that's from a cultural awareness side or even from an environmental awareness side. I think that's the first thing, is just to be open. I think the second thing for me is to be involved. Be involved, be engaged. Whether in the environmental side, be engaged in the process, be involved. try to find out like how these things work. If you don't know, figure out, like, start from agency, start from the city. You know, you pay your taxes. If you pay taxes, like, these are things that are available to you. Figure out a way to get involved, get engaged. Same thing with culturally. Find a way to get involved, get engaged. Research, Google. There's so many different things available now. YouTube, there are documentaries on Netflix. There are PBS, you know, PBS is free on everybody's station. You can always find something culturally related there. But find a way to get involved and get engaged. And then lastly, you know, take action, right? So environmentally, take action. If that means you're starting off with recycling more, great. If that means that you're sitting in on city council meetings, do that. Like, now, take action and then up your action up, right? Like, move from recycling to understanding what those new projects are that are going to be happening in your neighborhood and how it might affect your neighborhood, right? Take action in not just watching the documentary about an African whatever, but say, hey, I think I'm going to actually book a flight and like do a vacation to like Nigeria or Cameroon or South Africa or wherever, just to get the experience. So now it's like, I've taken action. I've gone to a restaurant, I've ate their food. I think I'm going to actually experience their culture. Take action, book that trip. So those are the three things I would say.
How would you, my last question that I always ask is, how would you define being a boss lady?
A boss lady is a lady who is able to defy all the odds, no matter the circumstance or the obstacles thrown her way. She knows that she's able to defy them at all costs because she is that boss.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. That was a beautiful ending. Thank you guys again for watching. I'm gonna put her information in the description down below. If you have any question, feel free to really start a conversation down below about anything womanhood, culture. How can we actually create connection among each other and have a listening ear so that we can actually better understand, like she said, look at people's story from their own lens. So thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Okay.
All right.
Awesome.